Good morning and welcome to the Step by Step Listening page. It's now What's Working Wednesday. For those who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Andrews, the founder and also author of Manage Your Critic from Overwhelm to Clarity in 7 Steps. Today we're talking about the importance of the right role models. One of the things in life is that we can often look at other people for inspiration and aspiration, and we may get despondent with ourselves because we see and hear other people doing things and wish that we could do it the same way as them. So today I want to talk about some 3 steps, some really practical things to think about in order to make sure, one, that you choose the right role model, that you're role modeling yourself in order to fit in, and also the importance of when other people with lots of experience say you just need to do something, it's unlikely to just be a just. So let's first of all talk about the choosing the right role model. Loretta, good morning. Lovely to have you here today. So one of the things that often happens is when we are observing people, we see them doing things that we would like to be able to do. But what we don't understand or don't know necessarily is how they think and how they process the details of what goes on in their mind, the way that they're naturally hardwired to do things. And it's really easy to follow people who think very differently and work very differently, and then get very frustrated because we can't model or do it that way. So it's really one of the things I use is the Wealth Dynamics profiling tool for those of you that work with it. So you've got 5 main energies. You've got the top one is the dynamo energy. So they're big blue sky thinkers. They're really good at coming up with ideas. And so if you give them a blank piece of paper and say, this is the problem, they'll give you 100 what you could do. If you talk to a blaze energy person, they're really good at motivating other people, inspiring and changing other people. They're really good at, they've got a real energy about them. They've got they talk to think, so they can often articulate things very clearly. You get tempo energy. They're really good at delivering stuff, getting on and doing things. You tell them what to be done and when to be done, they'll just get on and do it. They like looking after people. They're very in the moment, very sensory, very present right now. And you get the steel energy, who are really good at systems and processes, more introverted usually. So often there's lots going on, but it's all in their head or quietly on the computer screens. And you're not really hearing and seeing very much, but they process things very differently. Now, if you were, let's say, for example, you're a tempo energy, you're very in the moment, you're very good at doing things that people tell you what to do, and you're trying to role model a dynamo energy who's really good at coming up with loads of ideas, you can start to criticize yourself. You can start to have a critic that thinks you're not good enough. But recognizing what you're already good at, that's what What's Working Wednesday is all about, and understanding how you do things and what works for you first and foremost, will make sure that when you are choosing your role models, you're choosing it for the right reasons. So there are times when I'm a supporter energy. So there are times when I want to role model, I want to learn from people who are very steel energy. So I ask them I'll ask them questions. So the clean language questions like, so how are you doing that? What's the first thing you do? And when I start to really understand how somebody else is doing it, but I already know that they think and feel and operate different to me, I'm listening with compassion and care for them, but also compassion and care for myself. I'm not giving myself a hard time. I'm just fascinated by the fact that this is how I would have approached it, and that's how they would approach it. So one of the things you can do is consciously choose people who you know think and feel differently about things than you, and be curious, because they will help to balance your system up, because you'll have your perspective and theirs, and that gives you a different way of looking at things. But I see lots of people going out trying to get lots of advice from other people, but not having clarity of their own thinking and their own thoughts. So if you're going to role model other people, don't forget to also start with role modeling yourself. So the best person to role model, first of all, is yourself. Model out what you do, how you do it when it works well. And then when you ask other people how they do the same thing, you're only having to take pieces of that model. So you can role model people that are opposite you. But if you consciously know that somebody is very similar to you, so for example, if I'm working, I tend to, and I have a number of people in my network who are also on the supporter energy, who are blaze energy. And because we have a natural way of thinking that's very similar, it will never be exactly the same. Our own stories, our own life histories create different ways of thinking about things. I will go and talk to them and say, look, this is the thing I'm challenging with. how would you do it? But because I know we're quite similar, it's likely that it's quicker and easier for me to do it. But it also gives me a new perspective. So good morning, Robbie. Good morning, Loretta. Thank you very much for your lovely warning welcomes. So we're talking all about role models, who to choose to role model, and using the Wealth Dynamics tool. I will put a link below when I finish. So those of you who want to know more about Wealth Dynamics, it's a tool that I've been using for about 3 years, 4 years now. I don't really like people being putting labels on people, and don't like people having, I mean, you know, even when you look at all the labels we've got now with dyslexia, autism, Asperger's, they help the brain to go, actually, this collective form of behavior, this is a label, and it just helps us simplify things down, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more. It does help us to make sense of the world. If we go, oh, so somebody who doesn't read that is in that way is dyslexic, and people who need things this way are autistic. When we've got labels, whether we put someone on a pedestal as a role model, or somebody who's really good at making money, or someone who's really good at motivating people, those labels are really good as a starting point. And Wealth Dynamics is one of those tools that I use as a starting point. But my purpose is always to raise our awareness of how differently we all think, and for you to get to know yourself better, so that you know how you fit into a system and how you can add value and what you could be truly trusted to do. So when you're choosing your role models, be conscious of what it is that you do that works well for you before going to look at other people. Which brings me on to the step 2, is about knowing your own stuff. Take your own advice. So one of the things that I often, a good way of finding out about role modeling, you might be either wishing that you could be like somebody else, or you might be wishing somebody else would be more of something. So it tends to happen with parenting. So you might be saying to your children, I've got an example in my book about the dishwasher. One of my clients was really worried about her son, and he was lacking confidence, he lacked drive, he seemed to lack focus in his life, and she was really concerned about him. So she, the task was to write down everything that she was worried about him. She was, you know, things he wasn't doing, like he perhaps wasn't applying for jobs, he wasn't keeping his room tidy, he wasn't taking pride in himself, dishwasher, etc., etc. And so she wrote down all of them. And one of the things I do is the Byron Katie exercise, Love Thy Neighbor, and it's going through each of those and just checking, is it true, if not truer, that you're guilty of doing those things? And so as she went through the list, she started to realize that she did those things. So what she was actually doing, he had been modeling her, so she had been the role model. So it's also being aware that we are the role model to other people. So investing time to get to know ourselves, and if we are criticizing somebody else, be curious, because it might be that either you wish you could be like them, or actually they're reflecting back a behavior that you're not consciously aware that you do. And so this particular lady, she was ticking off everything and going, oh yeah, I do that. So she had been self-employed for years, didn't have, you know, was quite free with how she used her time. So he was like showing all that behavior of not really having any structure, and actually that's what she had done, and she was really happy in life and everything was fine in her life, so therefore she stopped worrying. But I do remember the particular case of the dishwasher. Basically he would never unload the dishwasher, and it was true, if not true, that she never unloaded the dishwasher. She hated unloading the dishwasher too. And the other factor was her husband really didn't mind doing it. He was quite happy to do that as his contribution. He was quite happy that that was his chore. He wasn't bothered that the son didn't do it. He wasn't bothered that the wife didn't do it. And so she had a couple of choices. If she wanted to empower and motivate and be the role model to her son to do the dishwasher, she could either learn to do it herself and then role model it, have the arguments that she was already having, saying that he ought to do it, or accept that he will get by in life if he doesn't know how to empty a roll. You know, what was the purpose of him doing it? It's like he will know how to actually empty a dishwasher when he grows up. Well, he'll work that out somehow when he needs to, was the general idea. But also it's about him contributing, and so starting to notice how he contributes in other ways becomes more important. So also about yourselves is just check in with yourself. If you're looking externally for role models, often when you look at yourself, you have got all the resources and information that you need inside to work out whether you're being the best version of you or not. Where it becomes important to get advice and help from other people is sometimes we're out not consciously aware of how we add value and what we do well. So the last bit is thinking about when you do go to other people for advice, if you've decided who your role model is, you know what works for you, and you are being the best role model you can to yourself and the people that you want to inspire and empower, then when you do decide to go to it for advice, one of the things I always find really interesting, even in my book, I've said to you, it's 7 steps to clarity. When you go to a role model and you ask them how they do something, when they say things like, well, you just need to do, all right, the likelihood is it's never going to be a just. And even if you tell somebody as a role model or a mentor, you say something, well, you just need to do this. It's, for me, it's always an alarm bell. So when someone says just, I might say to them, what kind of just? Is that just? Because it's a word that we use and we hear, which actually usually contains about 25 or 30 years of wisdom and knowledge that has been built up on iterations and iterations. And so we get advice from somebody and they'll say, oh, so in my case, 7 steps to clarity. So number 1, the C is clarity, is curiosity. And I talk about the 7 kinds of listening, all the questioning techniques and feedback. So you just need to get curious is what I'm saying. Well, I don't actually say that, but it is about developing your curiosity muscle, being curious about yourself and other people so you have more compassion and care. But when I learned how to, 10 years ago, is when I started my training as a coach. I did 12 days of training to develop the basic skills of clean language. I went back and did that training course 2 more times. I did 36 days of training. And I had to add up how many hours of coaching I've done. So in the last 10 years, I've done 10,664 hours of coaching, roughly. So I've been practicing clean language and a discipline of really listening with people without judgment, so they can hear the whole of themselves. So I might say to you, you just need to get curious. You need to ask more questions. You need to be better at listening without judgment or criticism of yourself or other people. You need to be able to improve your feedback. That sounds quite simple, but actually it was an iteration process. So when you get advice from people, just be aware, because where I can see confidence going and people criticize themselves is when it sounds so simple when the person says it, and then when you go to try and do it, it doesn't work. And then you can start having that inner voice that's saying, I'm useless, I can't do this, why doesn't my brain work properly? And most of the time it's because what they've told you isn't the whole picture. Another good example is I worked with a sales trainer years ago, and he had outsourced his cold calling for his company, and he did cold calling for big corporates, for big brands, and he got paid quite a lot of money for it, but he needed to keep his cold calling for his company. So he outsourced it, and he was really disappointed with how much money he was spending on the cold callers, and they weren't getting the results that he would have expected from himself. And so when we spent the day, we modeled out how he did cold calling at his best. And because he was saying, well, they just need to do this, they just need to do that. When we really broke it down, we got off the call and I was asking him, so what just happened? He said, well, I heard a click in the background. So that tells me that probably the secretary is not in the same room as him. So I'll make a note of that. So when I next turn back, I can ask different questions because I know that he isn't in earshot of the director. So there were so many nuances, so many stuff that he was completely unaware that he had built up this kind of entourage of information that meant he had this complex flow chart that said if he heard this, he did that. And he created a database of information about people, and they would call back 2 or 3 days later more empowered because he now knew more about the company, he knew more about the office, the way it's set up, people's names. So he was often not calling the very first time to get a sale. He was often calling to build up his knowledge and awareness of the company and how they work, so that when he approached them, he had already demonstrated he was listening to them, that he had heard them. But he hadn't been aware. It becomes sort of second nature to him that he was listening to lots and lots of different things, and the clicking of the door and where the secretary was and who made the decisions. There was lots and lots of decisions. So 2 things that came out of that situation when he role modeled himself and he got to know how he did it. One, he put his prices up for what he was doing for the corporates because now he understood just how complex it was, and he truly valued what he knew, which is this is the reason why we write books, because when you write down stuff, you get to model how you do things. You start to look at all the nuances, and 2, you can value what you know. Often you improve the process because you do start to find there are systems and processes in there that are outdated that even you know could be more effective and more efficient. But he also approached it differently to the cold calling. And actually his short-term solution was that he outsourced different tasks. He got his bookkeeping and that sorted out, and he went back to doing a couple of hours a week cold calling because he realized he could do that much quicker, and that over the future he would then train the cold calling companies up. He wouldn't, although he's paying them, he would train them in his own efficiency, his own skills, because he would get a better quality of training from that. So Robbie, you've got here, great message, Cheryl, on the role modeling, contribution and the dishwasher, very relevant in my household right now. Fabulous. Well, another one I want to share with you is one that I used to, the one I hear a lot when I do teenage coaching with parents, and not I do a huge amount of that nowadays, but is about the bedroom. We'll often complain. I used to be terrible for wanting my children to tidy the bedroom, and when I really got down to it, you know, my bedroom was the dumping ground. Now I keep my home pretty clean and tidy, so the stuff where I have to share space with other people, it'll be messy perhaps, but after dinner we tidy up, and before I go to bed I tidy up at the living room before I go to bed. And generally my office, although I sometimes have paperwork piles, they're kind of organized. It's just who I am. I have a kind of routine that when I go to bed I tidy up, except for my bedroom. When I go, I used to have I don't know if anybody else has got these wear again piles. So I'd get undressed, and because I've worn it once, I'd think, well, I can't put it in the wardrobe, so but I didn't want to put it in the washing because it felt like a bit of a waste. I could wear it again. So I'd have this pile of clothes. It was my wear again pile. And if I had retreats going on, I'd often move stuff around from the house into my bedroom in order to declutter and clear the spaces even more for the retreats. And often they'd stay there. So my bedroom was often a complete tip. And yet I was trying to teach my children to take pride in their space. And the space that I was deemed was their space was their bedroom, and wanted them to keep it clean and tidy. And what's really interesting is that I would do all the nagging and I do this. And one of the rules I had is if they didn't clean their bedroom, my belief was that they didn't have pride in themselves. But when we actually modeled what was happening for my daughter, basically it was the one space that she had complete choice. You know, I would go and do the food shopping, so I was kind of choosing what she was eating. I would be at the time choosing when the internet went off, choosing when she should go to bed. School were telling her what she needed to do. There wasn't much time in her space. So actually choosing how her space was, and having it being different to how the rest of the house was, that was her choice. And so her bedroom was the only space that she could control, that was completely in her control, that she had the freedom to do what she wanted to do with it. However, there was a day when I do it every sort of 6 months. I declutter my bedroom, have a massive clean up, and she came in and she went, oh, this feels lovely. She said, can we do my bedroom? Would you come and help me? And so together we decluttered her bedroom, and she got it really clean and tidy. And so by being the role model for her to do it, but also what happened is I became consciously aware of how challenging I find it to keep my bedroom tidy, and therefore had more empathy and compassion for what she was going through. Now, recently, we've just redecorated the bedroom, and I was aware that the main reason for the bedroom looking messy was this wear again pile. And so we became consciously aware of that and made a solution up. So I've got hooks now on the wall with the word love and some hangers, so I can hang up my wear again pile. And what's been really interesting is because it's up there, it takes me just as much time to put it on the hanger up there. I've ended up being able to put it back in the wardrobe. So now my bedroom is staying cleaner and tidier on a day-to-day basis. So it comes back to, with role models, is you have to know yourself really well. You have to know what works for you. If you want to find a solution to something that's not working, then it's choosing the people very carefully. If I'd gone and asked somebody, like Mark's really good at putting things away instantly. I'm not so good at that. I tend to have piles and things, and I organise them and sort them at the end. So it's choosing who you ask for advice. And when they do tell you, you just need to do these 3 steps or 7 steps, even in the stuff that I'm teaching, it sounds really simple, but be kind to yourself, because the likelihood is they've got 25, 30 years of wisdom in that, if they're 25 or 30 years plus older. And so it might sound simple, but the likelihood is they haven't given you all of the information. And that's why it's really important to develop your listening and questioning skills to get that curiosity muscle going. Because if you could say to them, so what kind of curiosity is that? Or what kind of tidy the bedroom is that? And so, okay, mum, what's the first thing you do? And actually what happens is I just get sick of the mess. And I need to do something. But what we discovered with Paige when we looked at her, how she did it, for her, she just saw overwhelm and she didn't know where to start. And so actually talking it through what was the starting point, that gave her some new strategies. But it also made me aware of, what stops me from starting my bedroom, why I ignore it. And most of the fact is because I don't see it. I go to bed, I get undressed, close my eyes, wake up, get out of bed, usually sneak out because Mark's still asleep. I'm very rarely in my bedroom looking at it, whereas every other room, I'm in it on a regular basis. I see it all the time. And if I can see it, it usually bothers me. So I do something about it and change it. Whereas I don't see my bedroom, so it didn't used to bother me. Now I take more time to see it, and therefore I apply the same lessons I have for the rest of my home in my bedroom as well. So I want to find out from you today, who are your role models? Who are you role modeling right now? Who are you aspiring to be more like? And who are you the role model to and for? And just to be, what would we come to you for? If I was wanting help or some services or support, what are you really great at? So who are you looking to role model? So what's the thing you want to develop? Who are you role modeling right now? And what would we come to you for? What are you role modeling that we can learn from you? What are you really great at? And if those two questions leave you feeling stumped, just be curious about it. Be curious about the fact that you are on this planet and you are a role model to many people. The way that you speak to the cashier in Asda's, the way that you speak to your children, the way you speak to your partner, everything that you do, see, hear, be and feel, people are watching and learning from you. And they'll be watching and learning the stuff that you're really proud of. And they'll also be watching and learning the stuff that you're not so proud of. And so I truly believe it's in our best interest to consistently look at ourselves and make sure that we're showing up as the best version of ourselves today and every day, so that we both inspire ourselves and other people. Lots of love. Have a fantastic week. Speak to you soon.